Hi everyone, it's Raina. So I'm doing a video on the more challenging aspects between the moon and Pluto in the natal chart, specifically the square and the opposition. And I noticed that the squares and oppositions with the online resources a lot of times will include both and not just one. And this is because there are similar themes, just like with the trines and the sextiles. So I figure that, one video is enough for both of these aspects. And you may even, when you hear me talking about the square, you may even see a little bit of yourself if you have the opposition. So I came upon a website that I think is really fascinating, and I'm going to be looking into it a little bit deeper on my own time. It's called astrohealer.com, and when you go to it, and when I was looking at the Pluto and aspect to the moon, they say by Tina Rahimi, so I assume that's the person who is writing all this wonderful information. Now, one of the things that she was talking about is she was talking about evolutionary astrology. So, which I take to mean when we use astrology to become self actualized. So rather than just the straight up predictive astrology of like, okay, this is in your chart, let's look at the transits, look at the progressions, let's see what's going to happen to you, that you're taking your natal aspects and you are using that to take inspired action. That's my definition of what evolutionary astrology is. And she mentions, what Pluto represents to evolutionary astrologers compared to those who take a psychological approach. Now, I actually thought that evolutionary and psychological psychological astrology were one and the same, but apparently there might be a difference there. And I think that maybe the psychological astrology is simply seeing people's motivations for what they do and analyzing it from that perspective. So I don't think that it's really, I think they're kind of like complementary belief systems, if you will. So what they said was that in evolutionary astrology, which I'm not, well versed in these two areas, so I don't know it, but they say that Pluto is considered the soul in that particular belief system. And in psychological astrology, it's considered to be this, I would call it the shadow, because she says what we have managed to repress, the pain, the shame, and those kinds of things. So I would call that the shadow. So I think that maybe the distinction between psychological and astrology and evolutionary astrology is that we're looking at explaining behavioral patterns right now that might be unconscious with psychological astrology, and the evolutionary astrology is more like your alchemy, more like you being the conscious co-creator, knowing what you want to change within yourself and going for it based upon your astrological makeup in the cosmic blueprint of this incarnation known as the natal chart. So I hope that, I'm getting this somewhat based on what I can infer from this particular post on this website, astrohealer.com. And so the whole idea here, when we're talking about contacts between one planet or heavenly body and another, we call these aspects. And some we call, some people might say good or pleasant, easy aspects like the trine and the sextile. The square and the opposition are considered difficult, and the conjunction can go either way. So, for instance, with the conjunction, we're talking about it intensifying this contact. So I did a video on Pluto, the moon and Pluto as a conjunction, which I have in my own astrological makeup. And that is really concentrating that contact, and it becomes like moon in Scorpio. Okay. So, because it's just saying, the moon in conjunction with Pluto, it doesn't mean, uh-oh, that's terrible, or, oh, wow, that's amazing. It means, it depends on other factors. So if the moon is afflicted, if it has hard angles to it, if Pluto does, that could indicate that the personality is, more complicated, and the conjunction may create some kind of difficulties for a person. Now, same thing we can look at with the squares and the oppositions is that it's kind of that difficult aspect that is similar to the moon in Scorpio, but the shadow side of that. And if you happen to have this one of these aspects, either the square or the opposition, I don't want you to think that, oh gosh, I'm doomed, I have this aspect. No, because I would dare say that all of us have at least a few challenging aspects, but some people might have like a ton of trines. That's always possible. I think I've seen that, but mostly I see a smattering of all kinds of things. So it's not, usually people have a mixture. And the thing about, let's just say like squares, the thing about it is that even though it may be a challenge for you, you also may feel more motivated to change. And so there's so much potential for growth. So it's all in how you view your chart as a whole, all of it, not just the aspects, but other elements in it as well. So when we're looking at the moon square Pluto, for instance, look at the sign of the moon, because this can often give an insight into the nature of your mother. Not saying that that's her sign, but her nature. So for instance, if you have a moon in Aries, you may have a mother who is very domineering, very volatile herself emotionally, very, like almost bordering on hysterical in some cases, or like kind of a bully. I'm looking at it in the more challenging. I mean, it could always be that the mother is very ahead of her time and, very active and ambitious. It could be something positive, but looking at it from the shadow side. And whatever the sign is of the mother, this person could have an obsession with you. And so if you're a male, we could get into this Freudian stuff, right? If you're a male, the mother may be, wanting to keep you almost like her husband, where if she doesn't have a good relationship with your father or your stepfather, that she is trying to, kind of like have that type of relationship with you. And that's a form of smothering inappropriate kinds of treatment, parentifying the child. The daughter, she could even have like a competitive streak, but there can be this overly controlling type of a mother. And what happens is that you become very reactive. So you push back And it makes it very hard for somebody who has this square to kind of like navigate relationships in an even-handed way. There can be a tendency to always have a sense of conflict within yourself, uh, and even create self-destructive patterns as a result. Now, this can also make you obsessive yourself when you are, and when I say obsessive, that sounds like a stalker or something. But it can, what I mean is that you can, like compulsive, obsessive, you can smother others that you're close to because of, this same pattern that was done to you. And the nature is very intense, just like if you had the moon in Scorpio. The nature, your emotional nature is very intense. And this is the more challenging emotions that we experience in life, like vengefulness, jealousy, um, feeling a sense of being rejected. When I say vengefulness, it's coming from feeling like a victim. These kinds of feelings can be something that you're always battling, because with the square, there is this kind of butting of heads, and you have to be the one, again, with alchemy, that you're willing to look at these things head on and not shy away from them, and you're able to dissolve the square so that it softens it. And part of this, I think, is how you tame those more extreme emotions. To me, a lot of it is going to involve healing yourself, and forgiveness is part of this healing, because you may have had painful experiences in your life, and it's hard enough, all of us, to have painful experiences. But when you have like someone, like a parent who tries to control you, that can make it that much more difficult to act as a free agent, because you feel like you're always rebelling against something, you're pushing back on something. The astrologyking.com described it as compulsive behavior patterns, dark emotions. And dark emotions, are the ones that are the most that we don't like to see. Like if your sun is in Libra, you may really be in denial over this side of yourself, and you may claim it's not there. That's one of the reasons why getting a handle on it is so important, because you can just be operating on automatic and doing these things. Now, the other issue with this placement is about sexuality. Um, the taboo types of concepts around sexuality. And this is, Pluto can be about power. And when somebody, for instance, if you've experienced sexual abuse, a lot of times what will happen? Somebody will react to that abuse by trying to gain control over the situation later on. And this can involve using sex as a way to feel empowered. And this can run the gamut. But it's not, and it's funny because they mentioned on astrologyking.com domination. So even like S&M, or being a dominatrix, these kinds of things can come about trying to gain power over that past experience of victimization. But yeah, Pluto, Scorpio deals with taboos. Now, the compulsive, obsessive, this is kind of like addictive tendencies, which I think addictions are obsessions, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. I think that is a form of it. But also they mentioned diet, and they said diet, substance abuse, or bigotry. They mentioned bigotry, which in the form of racism or other phobias. Um, I don't know about that one. I'm going to leave that one alone. That I think that compulsive and obsessive, yes, but I don't see those things as fitting that bill. Maybe you see otherwise. I do think that a sign like Scorpio could have very rigid ideas about things and emotional fixity that might, come in the form of some kind of prejudice. But I don't see this position in that way. That's just my opinion. Although, yeah, I mean, if you look at the moon as being the emotional, the reactive nature, yes, I suppose people can react to certain groups. But I would say in those cases, if that happened, it would likely be because of a traumatic experience in the past with somebody from that group. And then the person broad brushes and says all members of that group are capable of this. And this is because the moon, the moon and Pluto, because they form a square, they create that blockage, because this is going to be an emotional blockage. Now, let me mention the opposition. Oppositions usually mean that the two planets that are involved are in opposite signs, but this is not the case 100% of the time. It really does involve the degree span more than the signs. But in this case, as all oppositions are occurring, there's like relationships are involved, because it can be a projection. It's like you and somebody else, and how do you relate to that person? In this particular case, this can, and this is according to the astrologyking.com, be the greatest indication of bipolar disorder of all the aspects that deal with oppositions. Okay. Now, a lot, there have been people that say, how dare you diagnose people? You're not a mental health specialist. I'm hoping that people are smart enough to realize that. No, I'm not a therapist, a mental health specialist. I'm parroting what I saw on a website. The reason that I think that there's a lot with oppositions. There's a bipolar element. Using the word bipolar not in a diagnostic sense, but simply as a descriptive type of label. Something just to pigeonhole a certain behavioral pattern, which means people who go to extremes. The sign of Scorpio, which is co-ruled by Pluto and Mars, to me is probably the most extreme sign in the zodiac, meaning that Scorpios do not tend to have middle ground. They don't tend to be blasé about things. They either are like gung-ho or they're indifferent. And even when a Scorpio person is obsessive, totally into somebody, if that person does them dirty or whatever pisses the hell out of them, they can turn into ice. Okay. And it's kind of like chilling, pardon the pun, uh, to witness something like that, because how can somebody go from one extreme to the other? And, Scorpio is like, oh, well, you know, it is what it is. So this kind of opposition can lend itself to emotional extremes, and this can cause other people to be a bit leery. On astrologyking.com, the exact sentence is, your emotions can become so intense that they frighten other people. Now, will they frighten everybody? Nope, because if you're dealing with a Scorpio, if you're dealing with maybe a fire sign that tends to be rather dramatic and passionate, they may, take it with a grain of salt, if as long as your sun sign isn't Scorpio. No, I'm just joking. No, I mean, I'm really not joking. As long as you don't have other evidence of being intense as well, then that can be a bit much. But if you're somebody, let's say you have a sun sign in Gemini, maybe this gives you a bit of gravitas. But it is a challenging aspect, so it's not going to come without some kind of challenges. Okay. Um, this opposition can lend itself to being victimized by other people who probably sense your emotional nature and try to get the best of you as a result. This is the way they describe it here. It reminds me of energy vampires, because they said these people seek emotionally vulnerable people to manipulate and control. They seek to steal your positive energy and self-confidence. Now, I think that the reason that they're, talking about positivity and self-confidence is because when there is an opposition, and especially if we're talking about the moon being involved in the opposition, this can be a situation where you are looking for emotional resonance in another person. Perhaps you're hoping that somebody will complete you. Remember Jerry Maguire, "You complete me," which makes me cringe to hear something like that. But that's what somebody like you might feel, because the opposition, that's the interesting thing about it. Depending on what two signs are involved, these are called complementary signs, opposing signs. So it actually works out that way. And so you may have times where you're very elated and times where you feel, down. Okay. Now, does that mean that you are doomed forever to have this because this is in your natal chart? Nope. This is going to be the default. But just like as a computer or your phone settings, you have a default, you can alter that manually. And what that would mean in terms of this particular difficult aspect, or any that you have, is that you reprogram yourself. And I would say that meditation is a form of reprogramming, but I do feel that that some people, if they have gone through trauma in their life, that it's not about just reprogramming. It's about dealing with the trauma that you have experienced, because there is something called spiritual bypassing. And that is when people don't want to face the darkness that is within themselves. And so for some people, having therapy in the conventional sense is putting them on the road to recovery. For other people who really are already in touch with their energetic selves, they may find that energy healing is really a wonderful healing gift. There are actual types of energy work, or I mean, we know about Reiki and shamanic healing, but there are some types of body work where you're actually, like, I I would say like massage therapy is a form of it, but different types of massage. But there's this I don't know the name of it, but it actually releases trauma in the body, and the practitioner knows how to work with stored trauma. Like, they believe that trauma stores in the body. You might find that that is very helpful in releasing trauma, because sometimes trauma is very deeply buried. And even if the person were to go into therapy, they wouldn't necessarily be able to bring it up right away. Some people, get hypnotized, and they do past life regression to earlier in this lifetime, things of that nature. So I'm just giving you ideas. And when I say about meditation, the reason I'm talking about that is in terms of equanimity, because these wild mood swings can, I believe, in conjunction with other things, if need be, they can tame those extremes, and give you that equanimity that you're looking for. So anyway, I think I'm going to leave it there. I hope that resonated. And if you would like a private reading, this is how I do my private readings. I'm, looking at things from, what have you experienced? And, where are you going in your life's journey? Not just what are the transits, coming up for me. And of course, that's fun too, to explore. And I do that as well. But, I don't solely just look at transits. And I think sometimes people assume that astrology is all about predictions. So the link is below. My website is rainamoonastrology.com. Thank you for listening. Take care. Bye.